means that it was eternal, right? It means that within time it had no beginning and no end.
Isn't that the case? If something exists now, whether this universe had a beginning prior to having been something else, like you can believe in a multiverse theory, for example, how one universes give rise to other universes, cyclical universes. It doesn't get rid of the notion that I'm addressing, where you'll have to have something always in existence. The word always means wasn't preceded by absolute nothingness. It was always there.
That's fine.
If it was always there, whether time was present or not, it was present with its inherent characteristics. Because if you don't accept that, that means the properties or attributes came from somewhere else, which is not.
Okay, I'm just saying one of the characteristics specifically is that it wasn't always there, because always implies time, and it wasn't time bound. That's all. But it just, I know it makes the conversation difficult, and that's not what I want to do, but I'm just trying to demonstrate that the reason why we're having this conversation and that it's not getting us anywhere is that we're limited by our language and our understanding of how reality works. And I have faith in the fact, I have faith in the fact that that people smarter than us working on it their entire life will come up with explanation that we will not understand if we spend our entire life on it. So I think that reducing the origin of the universe to such a simple logic as there had to be some unclosed codes, and this unclosed code had to be intelligent, necessarily sets you up for failure when you try to explain it.
Are you really suggesting, again, I mean, this is what I find difficult, are you really suggesting, with our scientific development, we would come to know in the future that there was a time when there was absolute nothingness?
No, I never said that.
So it's a fruitless counter-argument from my perspective. Whatever argument you bring for the unknowingness of science that we have, or the ignorance of our scientific reality, it does not negate the fact that something was always in existence. And I use the word always, whether it's time-bound or not. Why? Something has to be always, because something exists today. So my next point is, do you believe this something that eventually, in whatever way, shape or form, gave rise to this, didn't have the attributes of consciousness and intelligence, or it didn't? Because do you find it's more conceivable, more, you know, as you described earlier, making more sense to you that a thing that existed always, with no beginning, didn't have consciousness, intelligence, but we do, and our consciousness and intelligence just came by itself? Is that what you propose?
I would say that makes more sense, and let's go to the root of the problem. Because let's leave aside the fact that we are completely unable to debate about the origin of the universe. We can make an attempt at it, but we'll both fail at it. But let's try to do it just for I don't know, for intellectual pleasure, I guess, for just the pleasure of this conversation. Let's do it anyway. Let's go to the root of problem. So there's this notion that there had to be something before the universe. If the universe began to exist, do you believe the universe began to exist? Yeah. So we're not sure about this. Many theories now are coming out saying that there was a big
many models. No problem. You can have many models.
So okay, let's assume it did start to exist. Now, if we assume it starts to exist, which is to begin with a dodgy premise because we don't know that. Let's see what the cause could have been, right?
It's not a dodgy premise. There are sufficient scientific understanding behind these models of the origin of our universe. Whether you like it or not, it's grounded in science, but you can have other models which says it was always in existence, this universe.
Yeah, what are the recent trends when it comes to the Big Bang?
Tell me, lots of models.
Yeah, there are lots of models, but one of the main ones that is starting to come up, that is starting to be published, is precisely the fact that there wasn't nothing before the Big Bang, but that there was a form of crunch, and that the universe was in a completely different state, and then after the Big Bang it changed essentially.
So go back to this original form of the universe. Was it like this always, or was this a result of something?
But do we agree that we're not sure that it didn't always exist?
From our scientific understanding, there's one understanding that you get by reality. I am not bound by the limitation of science. I also believe in revelation from God. That God created us, this thing that we are now saying eternally existed, we say is the originator of everything. And the originator sends information, communicates with us, telling us about who he is, what he has done in terms of creating this universe. So I'm not limited to this reality of the limitation of scientific understanding of what the true reality is, because science is just a method of determining reality in one particular way, and it has its limitation. It cannot determine the reality of lots of other things. For example, we cannot say who's the most beautiful person on...
Because that's subjective, so it's not a scientific fact.
Exactly, the science cannot use its method to determine the reality of that.
What we could do is ask everybody and see who's most popular, and you could say that's the most beautiful person.
So we're saying you cannot have a scientific test to determine this.
I just gave you one.
I'm saying this would depend on who these people think. You can have another person saying, I think. You can disagree.
You could say...
So you're going by what? You're going by what?
You would have to define what most beautiful means. If you agree that most beautiful is who is found as being the beautiful by the most people, you can test that.
So it's defined by the person who is asking the question. So you cannot address this.
But so you can address it. Depends what your question is. You have to specify your question.
If the person asks and the person's eye is most beautiful, and everyone else disagrees because they don't see it that way, you can't test it.
Fine,
because it's subjective, as you said from the very start.
There's subjective things.
So there are many things science is limited to. I just give you an example where it is not beyond, which is beyond the realms of science. It's this kind of altruism and issues like that. We believe in revelation, and revelation tells us about the reality. So when we say the origin of the reality,
moving away a little bit from the original topic.
We are saying about the origin of this cosmos.
Yeah.
Science is coming up with models. Scientists were not there present how the universe happened. We are just projecting back by looking at the universe now.
Yeah, and the evidence that the universe carries on.
Right.
Yeah.
So from our understanding of how the universe is behaving now, we are projecting in different models how the universe may have been in the past. And we are constantly learning. Yeah? So what we are saying is about what it was, we can only speculate through science. It will be speculation at best.
It depends what you mean by speculation.
To know for sure what happened while not being there is a speculation.
So you're saying that with revelation you can know for sure?
Revelation gives you, because God is the one who created it, it tells you this is how I do it.
Okay, well how do you...
So how do you do that? So you verify the revelation from it's revelation or not. So you have to assess the guidance or the message or the scripture that comes up and say, is this from God or not? Yeah. So your first question should be, does God exist?
Yeah, exactly. So let's come back to that. I think the notion of God existed is an interesting debate, because there's a few arguments that you can put forward for God existed. The notion, to me at least, that one of the religion on earth is true isn't a good one. It isn't a good claim. So this is the main issue that I take with religion, is the fact that they claim to be from God. But let's start from the beginning and let's try to see how we can reason about the origin of the universe and if there was a God or not. And the root of the problem to me is that if you assume that the first uncaused cause is God, is that supernatural, super powerful, all-powerful, all-knowing, omniscient, intelligent human being, to me this is like sweeping dirt under the carpet. It's literally like sweeping dirt under the carpet. And the reason why that is that you're ignoring the problem. You're just pushing it to a different place. You're essentially saying, oh, I found out what X is. X is Y. And then everybody goes, ah, okay. And we're just waiting for someone to come around and say, well, what is the value of Y in that equation? And the reason I'm saying that is that one of the atheistic arguments is who created God. And what we mean by that is not that somebody had to create God, but if you postulate that everything that came into existence started with the highest form of complexity, then you're just creating a problem that is even more complex than the origin of the universe.
There's lots of assumptions made in terms of what we believe is the creator. So you seem to accept that there are causes, and then eventually you can go to a cause. Either it's ad infinitum with no beginning of these causes, or there is a cause that is the first cause. So which one do you think is more sensible?
Sorry, that there's
when you're talking about causation.
Yeah.
So whether it's a crunch or an expansion, this is an effect of a cause. So if you go backwards, so either the causes come to a point where this is the first cause, or it goes on and on and on, never ending. Cause for our universe, our current universe.
Both are mind-boggling. I don't think any of the two make more sense than the other, and I'm glad to go over both of them.
Let's explain and see which one makes more sense to you. If you have a never-ending cause, it doesn't address the question, because you're saying what caused the cause, what caused the cause, what caused the cause, what caused the cause. You haven't answered the question. You just simply not answered it.
Yeah, but it's possible that it was this way. It doesn't matter if it doesn't answer the question.
When you say, if that was the case, would the current moment ever be?
Yes.
How?
It's a common misunderstanding of how eternity works. I mean, there's many ways of describing it. For example, you could say that current moment happened because whatever caused this moment happened 2 minutes ago, and whatever caused that other moment happened 5 minutes ago, whatever caused that moment, and you go like this in eternity.
Let me give you another way to look at it. This is a book that needs to go from my hand to your hand.
Yes.
There are infinite number of people in front of you and me. So it needs to pass infinite hands to reach you. Would that ever reach your hand?
No, but you're looking at the problem the wrong way.
I'm not looking at the wrong way. I'm looking at this book that needs to go from one to the other, from me to you. Yeah? So in between there are infinite number of people.
I understand your problem, but it doesn't matter if we exist in a reality where you're already handing me the book. It means that you've handed it to the person in front of me 1 minute ago, the person in front of that person 2 minutes ago, then 3 minutes, then 5 minutes, and it goes like this. This is what infinity means. This is eternity.
What I'm talking about infinity is this. Now, I am in a series of infinity before me. I got this book from another person. Infinite books. In front of me there are infinite number of people. You are not next on the line. You are line after infinite number of people. So with this book, remember there's an infinite series. It has come to me, right? For the sake of argument, because I've got it on my hand. And there are infinite number of people between you and me. Would that ever reach your hand?
The mistake you're making.
I haven't made a mistake.
Okay. The mistake, the way I see it, that you're making is that you're assuming a starting point within infinity, which is complete nonsense. You cannot do that. If indeed the universe has always been here, if it's eternal, basically, if it has no beginning, you cannot assume any starting points for any event. So you cannot say, well, you did. You giving me the book is your starting point.
I picked up in a series of, if infinity is in a line, I didn't pick up the very first point. I said, within any moment of this infinite chain, I'm presenting this book, and there's infinite number of people in front of you and me. Would that reach you, is the question.
If there's an infinite line of people that you're giving the book to, I'm part of this infinite line. At some point, you'll give me the book.
How would that ever happen to you?
So the present would be the moment where you give me the book. The past would be the...
I'm here, and there are infinite number of people still between you and me. Would that ever reach you?
But see, you're choosing a starting point. You're saying, I'm about to give you the book.
I am not a starting point. I am a point past infinity, a chain of infinity. I'm just using this, a book from that chain, and
I understand your point. I'm saying you cannot apply that to eternity. It doesn't work that way.
Why not?
Because you're choosing a starting point and you're going through an infinite regression.
No.
There's no such thing as an infinite regression.
Are you saying in infinity these events don't happen?
Let me give you an example. Let me give you an example to try to simplify what I'm saying. If blue causes yellow, if yellow causes green, and if green causes blue, right? What has caused blue?
Write it down, I'll tell you.
Okay. Do you have a pen? Does someone have a pen?
So you're dismissing that there's infinite behind you, so it never reaches you then?
I use it? Then have the book just Tell me what has caused yellow, for example. What has caused yellow?
From this chain,
yeah.
red.
Okay. What has caused green?
Yellow from that chain.
Okay. What has caused blue?
Which blue? This blue.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. And what has caused red?
That blue.
Very good. So we have an infinite chain of causation, and yet everything has a cause. So we can look at a sequence of events and feel like it has an origin.
That's what I did. Without taking any origin, I picked up within this chain here. That's me.
That's you
and that's you. There are infinite number of people. Would this book ever go to you? If there are infinite number of people.
But you see my point. Do you see my point? Think about this.
Look,
take some
first
time.
of all, look at the things you've done. Blue causes red.
Yeah, red causes yellow.
Red causes yellow, right?
Yellow causes green. Green causes blue. And then it's infinite. You can carry on. It causes red.
Does it cause red? So it's a cycle.
Yes.
The problem with this cycle change is it doesn't tell you when it started, what started.
Wait,
when it started.
Infinity never starts.
So if it's like this, let me give you another scenario to explain that this doesn't answer the question in any way, shape or form. Let's make a circle, right? This is what we're going to pick up from the floor. I'm going to pick this piece of paper. Let's do it properly. I'm going to pick this up, provided that he picked this up beforehand. He does the same thing. He will pick this up from the floor, provided that you pick up from the floor first. You will pick it up, provided that he picks it up. Now, this is a cycle of causation. Would this ever be picked up?
No, but do you see why? Because you're
putting
a
question first. Would this ever be picked up? Right.
The reason being you're putting an infinity amount of time between an intended intention and the actualization of that intention.
That's what we discussed.
That is not the way reality
There was always infinite existence. Something exists always.
I just demonstrated to you how it's possible. Take some time to think about that. Honestly,
I will think later, but what I'm saying is this. This you've demonstrated as a circle, and I showed you how it doesn't address the question. When you have a cyclical causation model, it doesn't demonstrate how things can be acted on if they are course dependent on each other. Like this paper would never be lifted up from the floor if the causes, like me, is dependent on him, he's dependent on you, and we're in a cycle. It will never, in infinite time, be picked up.
I know, we agree.
Right.
We agree with
but the problem with this, your argument against mine, is this: we are here. It got picked up. The universe is in existence. That means it wasn't cyclical.
My argument against it is that it does not represent how eternity works. It doesn't, because you're assuming a starting point by doing that. The starting point is your intention to pick up the book and an infinity time.
Let me clarify. What we agreed, that something has to always exist. That something has no beginning. So you can't put a beginning point. Right? Always existence. Always existence.
Exactly.
Not a beginning of existence. Now what we're saying is, this is what we describe the originator, who has no prior beginning.
If me picking up the book is me becoming blue on that example, then will I pick the book up at some point?
Calm down.
If you are dependent on something prior to you, if you're the first blue in the chain, which was red, then you'll never be picked up.
Yeah, but I will, because that's the thing.
Because it was in a cycle. All dependent on each other. It's called interdependency. If you're interdependent, then no action will proceed. It's not going to happen. You need to think about this example.
I have. Trust me, I have.
And I have too.
It doesn't. Okay. Well, think about the example I gave you, because the problem is, it does not apply to infinity. The infinite regression does not apply to a situation where the universe is infinite. It doesn't. It doesn't describe it.
This universe is not infinite.
It's the same that every single paradox that philosophers have ever come up with. This bad paradox.
This universe is not infinite, is it?
No, I'm saying it might be, and I'm saying that's possible.
If the universe was infinite, then it has internal inherent properties. So intelligence was part of it. So all this intelligent design that we see in the universe was actually a result of this internal intelligence. So you do believe in something which possesses intelligence and consciousness. But you don't call it God.
Yeah.
You call it what?
No, okay. So
that's the difference.
Let's leave aside the fact that the universe might have been eternal. I'm not saying it was, I'm just saying it's possible, and it doesn't actually come up against any valid contradiction in my opinion. Let's go now to option number 2. It did have a beginning, and let's look at what this cause could have been. And the point I was trying to make, and I would like you to address it if you could, if the cause of the universe is that all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving, supernatural being that is more complex than anything that we know of, why do you assume that this extremely complex entity that was there always doesn't require an explanation?
First of all, we are examining this reality, trying to understand this reality. Right? This reality dictates that there has to be a cause for this reality. Yeah. Now, what's the nature of this cause is something that we will have to accept, whatever the nature is. Either the nature was simple or the nature was complex, whatever it was. So if we come to a point where there was the first cause, and the first cause possessed intelligence, possessed power or energy, then let it be.
Okay, but how did it possess this intelligence?
How did it possess is something that you cannot answer with anything. Why? Because it's something that you have. No, it's not solving the problem. It's accepting the reality.
It isn't, because I think
because we are trying to find the best explanation for this, right?
Yeah.
If you found this is the best explanation, are you saying there is another explanation for that? So you're again going into the same quote. What caused that explanation? What caused that explanation?
If I tell you, for example, you got sick because you ate that bread, right? It's not enough. You have to explain why that bread made you sick, right? You have to carry on the reasoning.
You can carry on with the explanation of God, and you can carry on and you'll come to eventually a better explanation that God is more complex than you began with. So
Yeah.
in fact, your best explanation would be that God is most infinite. In fact, the way to describe is God is absolute in all his attributes. The more you examine this explanation.
Yeah, so
and
that doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't
no.
Can I just say why?
I'll tell you why it makes sense to me. Because if you're looking for explanation, the more you try to explain, it tells you God is more and more absolute. You cannot get away from this issue. It will come to a point where God is more and more powerful. God is more and more in his perfection. Absolute. If he's wise, he's absolutely wise.
He's the most complex form of life, or whatever you want to call it. You agree?
So why would that be a problem?
Because your explanation is we've started with the most complex form of life that already existed. That doesn't make any sense, because you're not giving an explanation for God.
Who said?
It's a
Who said the most explanation has to be the least complex? Who said that? Is this something given?
No. I'm not saying that.
We're not talking about Occam's razor here. We're talking about explanation which makes sense and which fits the reality.
I'm saying
the reality is whatever causes that you look into for the explanation, and the explanation of that explanation, eventually you come to a point you have to, for the finite world here, it has to be based on infinite. It has to be. There's no way out.
Okay. But you understood what I meant, though. How to me it's a cop-out, because you look at life, you look at the complexity of life, you look at the intelligence with our human being, and the explanation that you give for the origin of this complexity, of this intelligence, is something that is even more intelligent and more complex that you then say requires no explanation. To me, that is sweeping dirt under the carpet and it's just ignoring the problem, and it's a cop-out. To me, it's a cop-out.
Try to explain. Okay, try to explain the best explanation. What do you get?
Well, to me, it would make more sense.
Don't be cop-out then. Go into this cop-out business. Try to explain it further. Go on. Carry on. The more you go, the more perfect this being is going to be. When you say in your levels of complexity, it's going to be the absolute.
Uncreated.
It will be absolute.
But
so why the issue? Because eventually you're coming up to the same conclusion.
Do you see my point there?
Are you saying,
You're saying
just because, are you saying just because we end up with an explanation which is complex, we don't need to seek explanation for this universe?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it's a really bad explanation to assume, from my perspective, and many people who don't agree with it, it's a really bad explanation to assume something that is even more mysterious, more complex, more mind-boggling than the creation, to assume that this is the code. It's a cop-out for the short-sighted, in my opinion.
That's the reality. If the reality is there is an explanation and a cause for this universe, and that reality is more complex, then you have to accept it. That is it.
Okay.
One of the reasons, do you know one of the reasons?
It doesn't make sense.
It does make sense to me. One of the reasons why atheists in general do not want to worship God is called the pride. Because they don't want to even imagine a being that exists with that might and power and that perfection and attribute, absolute.
That would be great. That would be amazing.
No, they don't want to do that. They don't want to.
That's your assumption. That's your
Look,
assumption.
I've spoken to many atheists. The underlying root problems of atheism is this something that is unacceptable. I don't want to surrender to someone. No, is this something that always existed? Look, if the reality is something always exists, and you had never been in existence always, you have to accept that reality, that I am just an existence that was brought about by something more greater than I.
I completely disagree with that. I mean, it's your perception. I think many atheists that I've spoken to would love the notion that a God exists.
Why do they disbelieve in him?
But because it doesn't make sense. Because it doesn't make sense.
Which part didn't make sense?
I think
in their understanding, which part of the reality doesn't make sense that there is a creator needed?
Finding an explanation for the nature of reality, the way we observe it right now, is something that is really difficult for us to grasp. Now, coming up with the explanation that God created it is fine for a short period of time. You sit down, you say, God created it, now I'm okay, I feel like it all makes sense. But if you ponder a little bit longer on what does that mean? That before our existence there was the most complex life form possible that was there, that didn't require a cause, then that seems to be the hardest thing to explain. Out of all the possible, out of all the cause.
Is it easy to understand?
Yes, but I'm saying it's the
It has to be. Because if there is no prior existence, and that existence is always there, then any properties that this existence has to be inherent, self-possessed. So where did the property come from then? Tell me. Let's understand that. Where does the property come from?
It doesn't have to be the same.
Where does the property come from?
Can I answer that?
From another universe. We said
Back to square one.
Listen, okay, right. Mathematically.
Okay, can I entertain that a little bit? Where did that universe come from?
Hang on, okay, right.
Where did that universe come from?
Hang on, stop shouting a minute, I'll explain.
I'm not shouting, I'm just
You're just interrupting while I'm doing an explanation. Right. You know what a black hole is?
Yeah.
Okay.
A little bit.
Do you understand that mathematically, as a black hole gets bigger, its Schwarzschild radius, the area within which light cannot escape, gets bigger exponentially because of the rule of gravity. Okay. If you measure the mass in the universe as it stands, and you consider that if that was a black hole, how big would its Schwarzschild radius be, beyond which light can't escape? It turns out to be the same size as the universe, which kind of suggests we are inside a black hole. And if we are, then that black hole collapsed into a black hole from another universe, which would have had to exist before our universe. And that universe does not have to have the same physical properties as ours in any way or shape or form, in much the same way it's been mathematically proved by Hawking.
Where did that universe come from?
It can go round and round in circles. Believe it or not, it can actually be turtles forever.
Slow down. So where did that universe come from? Let's
Another
take
one.
it to
Another universe.
And
another universe.
is it
Another
uninvited?
universe. Yes.
Okay, so you're saying
It can be. We don't know, but it can be.
Slow down. Slow down. So according to your model, it can possibilities is always there.
Yeah.
Some form of the universe was always there.
Yes.
Right. So when it was always there, did it acquire a property from something else, or it had it inherently?
Well, it would have inquired. You're making a mistake in thinking that the properties that this universe has was acquired from that universe.
And where did that get it from?
Okay, the inside of a black hole does not have the same physical laws as the rest of the universe.
I am not arguing that you are like trying to argue with you that we have the same physical properties. Properties exist, whether it is in this form or that form.
Yeah.
The universes that you are now using as a cause for our universe. So if you have...
No, that's what I'm saying. It's not, you're working with a cause and effect mindset.
So there is no
the property has to have come from there because there's a rule controlling it. So it doesn't. The rules for this other universe can be completely different.
So let's understand that. You have another universe which gives rise to this universe.
Yes.
Did it cause it?
This universe happened in that universe.
If you have a series of universes,
but this universe didn't cause the black holes that are in it.
If you have this universe, which came as a result of this universe, was this caused by this universe?
It didn't happen as a result of the black hole.
It? I'm not talking about black hole. You're just totally talking about apples and oranges.
No, the black hole in this universe was not caused.
I'm not talking about black holes.
Was not caused.
I'm talking about the universe.
Yes, but
the universe is bigger than the black holes. Do you agree? Good. So,
if it's a black hole in another universe, that universe doesn't necessarily have to cause this universe.
My friend, listen. If you have a universe which came as a result of another universe,
that's what it's not a result.
Okay.
You're talking cause and effect.
Wait a second. So that universe and there's another universe. What's the connection?
This is inside, our universe is inside that universe. And here's the catch.
Is that universe existing always inside the other universe?
Yes.
And the other universe always existing inside the other universe?
It's better than that. That other universe might have billions of black holes just like we have, that are themselves individual universes.
So if our universe, this one, is inside this universe, and that universe is inside another universe,
yes.
Right. So you have universes concentrating on each other, but the fact is, there is a universe that was always there.
No.
So at one point,
it goes back and back and back and back and back
at
forever.
At one point, there was nothing, absolutely.
No, ever. It goes back and back and back and back and back.
At one point, was there a universe or nothing?
There's always been universes for other universes to appear.
So there has always been something?
Yeah.
Right. This something, did it have its own properties?
It would have had, yes.
Where did you get it from?
Oh, for God's sake, you're talking cause and effect. It got it from the last universe.
Sorry?
It got it from the universe before that.
But there is no end to these universes.
That's right.
So you are saying it goes on forever and ever, right?
Yeah.
So there is no first universe.
Well, no, there has always been a universe.
We are against once a time to share a love of God.
Is it conscious?
Honestly, I don't know.
What does it show to you? Does it show any conscious intelligence?
I'm not falling for that.
So falling. You believe in an eternal matter.
That's an anthroposophic argument.
You believe in the eternity of matter.
It appears to be conscious. Yes.
So it appears to be. Why do you say appears to be?
It seems from our human perspective to behave in a way.
So you have a universe which appears to be conscious, which appears to possess knowledge, which appears to possess intelligence, which appears to possess energy, and which appears to do things. Now, what you have done is simply renamed God and taken a concept where this God doesn't want to use it.
Your argument is that God is.
So you believe in a deist God, which
I am a deist, yes.
That's what I'm saying. Because you don't want to believe in a God who created you for a purpose. You believe you just. That's what I'm saying.
No.
So this is a cop-out.
No.
That's the cop-out we're talking about.
No.
Not being responsible or taking any responsibility.
No, my argument is that is not my argument. Okay. The problem here is that religious people tend to ask the wrong questions. Okay? Right? Yeah. Does God exist? Of course. Take a look around you. If you want to think of God as what you're describing, then yes, everything is sentient in a fashion probably greater than we can understand and exists. Right? That's not the important question. Okay? The important question is, from a religious point of view, what does God want of us? And the answer, from my point of view, is I don't know, and neither do you. No, we do. This guy's saying as well.
So when you say neither do us, are you imposing your ignorance on us?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Don't believe
We do.
You're interested.
No, we do. We do know. We do know. Don't
Just
talk,
because you're ignorant doesn't mean
don't talk about
you're ignorant too.
You believe.
No, but he has a right to say that, though. It doesn't mean that it's true. He has a
I'm
right
not
to
saying
say
he has a
that.
right to.
He
What I'm
isn't
saying is,
imposing his ignorance.
because someone saying, I don't know, you don't know either. You know,
evolution.
We want God's strength. We want God's strength.
you simply demonstrated your ignorance being imposing onto others. I don't know and you don't know either. That is your limitation and your ignorance.
I claim that we're all ignorant. You say, I'm not ignorant, I know. So I say, where's your proof?
Can we know anything?
Where's your proof?
Okay, can we know anything?
Where's your proof that you know?
Can we know anything?
Yes, of course.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, we know that we exist. I think therefore I am.
Right. So there are ways of knowing. There are ways of knowing.
There is at least a way of knowing.
Fine.
Angel of God.
We also have evidence that the Creator has communicated with us, given us revelation. And Quran being one of them. The final one.
I just realised I was talking to a Muslim.
But Christians believe the same. But Christians believe the same.
Oh, no, I absolutely understand. Yeah, but the point is...
That's step number two to me. Step number two would be, what are God's attributes? Once we assume the Creator, we would go to step number two. But I'm still not happy with step number one. We can move on if you want, but do you see at least...
Let's go back to step number one. The reality is we have to accept there is something greater than us.
Yeah. Can you just rephrase what I said, just so that I see if you have an understanding of my point, Elisa? Okay.
We are discussing about whether there is a cause of this universe, ultimately. And if this cause is complex, how do we accept that explanation? Because you are finding it difficult. How can we accept that as the best explanation when it seems to be very complex? To you, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So, basically what I'm saying is if you explain complexity of this world with something that is even more complex, that doesn't require explanation. It's a bit of an easy way of explaining it. It's saying something caused it, but we don't know what that something is.
When we make cameras, we are more complex than the camera. It's not difficult to understand and grasp, but what we have made is less complex than us. It's not difficult to grasp.
Yeah, we could make things that are more complex than us.
But what we can make things less complex. So the Creator can make this universe less complex than He is. Why is it so difficult to understand reality?
No, I agree with that. I'm just saying that the original cause is the most complex, most mysterious, most misunderstood, most whatever you want to call it, form of existence. It doesn't answer any question because you're left with all the questions who apply them to God.
Is it not like that? Best explanation, we limit to which one we consider the best explanation. You're simply saying that it's not the best explanation. Then that means then every explanation you give for anything is not the best explanation. There's always another explanation to it. It's better.
Can I ask you a question? One of the biggest questions that we all have, one of the biggest philosophical questions is why is there something than nothing, right? Rather than nothing. Saying that because God intended it doesn't answer the question, because then the question is why is there a God rather than no God? Why was there originally someone overpowerful, super intelligent? Why is there a God rather than no God?
It's not about why. The reality is, if you are here, there has to be always someone. There is no escape to this reality.
Yes, but
the reality is, if you are in existence now, there has to be always something that exists. Otherwise, you won't be even here. There will be nothing. The fact that something exists automatically demonstrates to us we have to surrender to something that always existed.
Well, you agree that you cannot answer the question why there is a God rather than no God. You cannot answer that question.
It's not about why there isn't.
Yeah, but that's the cause. God's existence is either reality or not a reality.
From our wicked ways.
Yeah? The fact that we are here discussing this demonstrates that to us without a shadow of doubt that His existence is a reality. Now, it may be difficult for us to grasp why does He exist? But the fact that He will exist because we exist. We are asking this question and He will exist because we are asking this question. That's reality.
But I'm fine with that. Do you see though how you could say that, well, if you question, for example, the fact that something exists rather than nothing. You know? I mean, I think everybody struggles with this notion. There's something in existence, there could be nothing.
The differences between questions are whys and hows.
Yeah, let me just finish my point. So the question of why is there something rather than nothing is one of those mind-boggling questions. But to say that God created it asks then the question of why is there a God rather than no God?
Why there is something, we're talking about why that God exists. God himself says, so I am an-awwal. I am first, before him there is nothing. He asserts this. That's the reality.
But did God create it? Did God create the world and everything in it?
This is subsequent creation. God's actions, his creation. Creation is an act of God. But why does God exist? God tells us because he is the one who is the originator of everything, the one who is al-awwal, ma qablahu shay. The one before him there was nothing. And he will be al-akhir, the everlasting one, ma ba'dahu shay. After him there will be nothing. So these are the God asserts. Now you can use all your tools, all your methodology, science and philosophy. You cannot escape this reality with whys and hows, but why God exists. It's a fact of reality.